You
"Can
listen
you
to me,
plant
you
your
murdering
seed
snake.
inside
Your
me?"
kind ain't
asked
welcome
the
here.
60-year-old giant male order bride to the lone rancher. The ranch sat far from the nearest town, surrounded by open land that stretched until the sky met the earth. It was quiet there, the kind of quiet that settled deep in a person's bones. The lone rancher had lived this way for many years. His days followed the same rhythm, waking before sunrise, feeding the animals, fixing fences, and working the land until his body ached in a familiar, almost comforting way. At night, he ate simple meals and sat on the porch, watching the stars without really thinking about them. He was not a bitter man, but he was a tired one. Life had not been cruel to him, yet it had taken more than it gave. His parents were gone, his closest friends had moved away or passed on, and the idea of starting a family had slowly slipped from his thoughts. He told himself that this quiet life was enough. Silence, after all, did not argue with him or disappoint him, but sometimes, late at night, he felt the weight of the empty house. The creak of the floorboards sounded louder, and the ticking clock reminded him that time did not stop for anyone. He pushed those thoughts aside, telling himself that he had chosen this life. Or maybe the truth was that life had chosen it for him. The idea of a mail-order bride came from a letter he almost threw away. It arrived one afternoon with the rest of the bills and farm notices. At first, he laughed at it, shaking his head at what he thought was a foolish idea meant for desperate people. He was not desperate, he told himself, just practical. Still, the letter stayed on the kitchen table longer than the others. He read it again that night, then again the next morning. The thought was not about romance. He did not imagine grand feelings or passion. He imagined company, someone to share meals with, someone to talk to at the end of the day, someone who might understand a quiet life instead of running from it. After weeks of thinking, he sent a short reply, honest and plain, explaining who he was and what kind of life he lived. He did not expect much to come from it. Months later, a message arrived saying that a woman was willing to come. Her age surprised him. She was 60. He paused when he read that part, unsure how to feel. Most people his age were looking backward, not forward. Still, there was something about her letter that felt steady. She did not speak of dreams or luxury. She spoke of survival, work, and wanting a peaceful place to spend the rest of her life. He agreed. The day she arrived, the rancher stood near the dirt road with his hands in his pockets, feeling strangely nervous. A dusty bus stopped, and she stepped down slowly, standing taller than he expected. She was a large woman, strong-looking, with broad shoulders and hands that showed signs of hard work. Her face was lined by time, but her eyes were clear and alert. She looked around at the land, then at him. There was no smile, no shyness, just a deep breath as if she were taking in the truth of this place. "So this is it," she said calmly. "Yes," he replied, nodding. "This is home." They shook hands instead of hugging. It felt right somehow, respectful and honest. On the drive back to the house, neither of them spoke much. The road was rough and dust followed the truck like a shadow. He wondered what she was thinking, whether she regretted coming. She looked out the window, watching the land pass by, her expression thoughtful but not fearful. Inside the house, everything was simple, clean but plain. One living room, a small kitchen, and 2 bedrooms at opposite ends. He showed her around without saying much, embarrassed by how little there was to offer. "It's enough," she said quietly, setting down her bag. "I have lived with less." That evening they shared dinner at the small wooden table. The food was basic but warm. At first their conversation stayed safe. They spoke about the weather, the land, and the work that needed to be done. She listened carefully, asking questions that showed she understood hard labor. There was no pretending, no false politeness. After dinner, the rancher began clearing the dishes, but she stopped him and insisted on helping. They worked side by side in silence, a strange comfort growing between them. Later, as the house settled into night, they sat across from each other with cups of tea. The lamp cast a soft light, making the room feel smaller and more personal. "There's something I should say," she began, her voice steady but serious. He looked up, meeting her gaze. "All right. I did not come here by accident," she said. "I have thought about this choice for a long time." He nodded, unsure where this was going. "I have spent my life working for others, raising other people's children, caring for homes that were never mine," she continued. "Now, time is not something I have plenty of." Her honesty caught him off guard. He had expected small talk, not truth spoken so directly. "I do not want to be invisible anymore," she said, her hands folded tightly. "I want my life to mean something before it ends." The rancher felt a weight in his chest. He understood that feeling more than he liked to admit. Then she asked the question that changed the air in the room. Her voice did not rise, and there was no shame in her eyes, only urgency and vulnerability. "I want to know if you would consider helping me leave something behind," she said softly. He froze, his mind racing. He did not respond right away, not because he was angry, but because he was stunned. No one had ever spoken to him like this, with such direct need and trust. She did not push, she waited. "I know this is unexpected," she added after a moment, "and I do not ask lightly. I am not seeking comfort or pleasure. I am seeking purpose." The rancher looked down at his hands. He had spent years avoiding big questions, convincing himself that his quiet life required no deep choices. But here she was, bringing one right into his home. "I need time," he finally said. She nodded. "That is fair." That night sleep did not come easily to him. He lay in bed, listening to the sounds of the ranch, replaying her words again and again. He was not offended by her question. He was unsettled by what it awakened in him, memories of choices not taken, of doors closed long ago. In the other room, the woman sat on the edge of the bed, staring at her suitcase. She knew she had taken a risk, but she did not regret it. For the first time in years, she had spoken her truth out loud. Outside, the wind moved gently across the land, as if the ranch itself were listening. Two lives, shaped by time and solitude, had crossed paths. What would grow from that meeting was still unknown, but something had already begun, and neither of them could turn away from it now. Morning came softly to the ranch. The sun rose slowly over the open land, painting the sky with pale light. The rancher woke early, as he always did, but this time something felt different. For a moment, he forgot that he was not alone. Then he heard movement from the other side of the house, the sound of a kettle being placed on the stove. Reality settled in quietly. He sat up on the edge of his bed, rubbing his face. The memory of the previous night returned to him in pieces. The honest conversation, the serious question, the look in her eyes. His chest felt tight, not with fear, but with the weight of responsibility. He had not given her an answer, and that uncertainty followed him as he dressed and stepped outside. The morning air was cool. He went about his usual chores, feeding the animals and checking the fences. Normally, these tasks calmed him. Today, his thoughts wandered. He wondered what kind of life she had lived before coming here. What had shaped her into someone so direct, so unafraid to speak her truth? Inside the house, the woman moved carefully, learning the space. She brewed tea and set out 2 cups, then prepared a simple breakfast. She did not rush. She had learned long ago that patience was a form of strength. As she waited, she looked around the kitchen. The room told a story of a man who lived simply and alone. Everything had a purpose. Nothing was decorative. It reminded her of places she had lived before, homes where comfort was not a priority, only survival. When the rancher came back inside, he stopped for a moment, surprised by the smell of warm food. She looked up and gave a small nod. "I hope this is all right," she said. "I didn't want to disturb your routine." He shook his head. "It's fine, thank you." They ate together in quiet. This silence felt different from the night before. It was less heavy, more thoughtful. After breakfast, she offered to help with the work. He hesitated, then agreed. There was too much to do for pride to stand in the way. They worked side by side for most of the day. She learned quickly, asking questions when needed but never complaining. Her movements were strong and steady. The rancher noticed how she handled tasks with confidence, as if hard work had been a constant companion throughout her life. During a break, they sat under the shade of a tree, sharing water. The land stretched endlessly around them. "You've done this kind of work before," he said. "Yes," she replied. "Different places, different people, but work is work." He nodded. "You don't talk much about where you came from." She looked out at the distance. "There isn't much romance in my story," she said calmly. "I was born into struggle. I worked young. I worked hard. I survived." Her words were simple, but they carried weight. He did not push her to say more. He sensed that when she was ready, she would speak. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low, they sat on the porch. The sky turned warm colors and the air cooled. The rancher finally spoke about himself, something he rarely did. "I wasn't always alone," he said. "I had plans once, a different future." She listened without interrupting. "Things didn't work out," he continued. "I focused on the ranch, told myself that was enough." "Was it?" she asked gently. He paused. "Most days, yes, some days, no." She nodded, understanding more than his words said. That night, each of them lay awake again, but this time the thoughts were calmer. They were learning each other slowly, carefully, like people walking across fragile ground. Over the next few days, a routine formed. They shared meals. They worked together. Small conversations filled the spaces between tasks. The rancher noticed that the house felt less empty. The woman noticed that for the first time in years, she was not just passing through a place, she was staying. One afternoon, while folding laundry, she spoke again about her past. "I raised children who were not mine," she said quietly. "I loved them, but when they grew up, they left. That is how life works." The rancher listened, his hands still. "When you give your life to others," she continued, "you hope that something of you remains. Sometimes it does not." He felt a deep ache in her words. He realized then that her question was not about desire or impulse. It was about being seen, about mattering. "I don't expect answers right away," she added. "I only expect honesty." He met her gaze. "That's fair." That evening, the rancher drove into town for supplies. As he walked through the small store, he felt eyes on him. News traveled fast in places like this. Whispers followed him, curious and judgmental. He ignored them, but the weight of other people's opinions lingered. On the drive back, he thought about how society decided what was acceptable, what was normal. He wondered why kindness and understanding were often the first things people forgot. When he returned, she was in the yard, tending to a small patch of soil. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Preparing the ground," she said, "for something new." He watched her for a moment. The act felt symbolic, though neither of them said it out loud. As days passed, the rancher began to notice changes in himself. He laughed more easily. He listened more closely. The walls he had built over years of solitude began to soften. One night after dinner, she shared something deeply personal. "I was told once that my life had already ended," she said quietly, "that I was too old to hope for anything more." He felt anger rise in him, not at her, but at the cruelty of such words. "I didn't believe it," she continued. "That is why I am here." He looked at her, truly seeing her, not as her age, not as her size, but as a person who refused to disappear quietly. "You're brave," he said. She smiled faintly. "So are you. You just forgot." That night, the rancher sat alone on the porch long after she had gone to bed. He stared at the land he had spent his life tending. He realized that growth did not only belong to the young. Change did not ask permission from age. Inside the house, the woman held onto that small smile. For the first time in many years, she felt that her presence mattered. Two lives, shaped by endurance and silence, were slowly learning how to share space, truth, and possibility. And though the hardest questions still waited ahead, something steady was forming between them, something rooted not in fear but in understanding. The days grew warmer, and the ranch settled into a steady rhythm. Mornings began with shared coffee, afternoons with work under the open sky, and evenings with quiet meals that no longer felt awkward. Still, beneath this calm surface, an unspoken tension remained. Both of them felt it, like a question waiting for the right moment to be asked again. The rancher found himself thinking more than he ever had before. While fixing a fence or guiding the animals, his mind drifted to her words from that first night. He did not feel pressured, yet he felt responsible. He knew she had trusted him with something fragile. Trust was not something he took lightly. The woman noticed his silence, but she did not interrupt it. She had lived long enough to understand that some decisions required space. Instead, she focused on making herself useful. She repaired old curtains, cleaned areas of the house that had been ignored for years, and even planted a small vegetable patch near the porch. Each action was careful, almost gentle, as if she were asking permission from the land itself. One afternoon, dark clouds gathered suddenly. A storm rolled in fast, bringing heavy rain and sharp wind. The rancher rushed to secure the animals, and she followed without being asked. Together they worked against the storm, shouting instructions over the noise. When it finally passed, both were soaked and exhausted. They stood under the porch roof, catching their breath. Rainwater dripped from their clothes and the air smelled fresh and clean. "You didn't have to help," he said. She smiled softly. "We live here together. That means we face things together." Her words stayed with him long after they went inside. That night the power went out. The house fell into darkness, broken only by the glow of a small lantern. They sat at the table, shadows dancing on the walls. The storm had passed, but the quiet felt heavier than usual. "I want to talk," she said calmly. He nodded. "I know." She took a deep breath. "I don't want you to think I am rushing you," she said. "But I also don't want silence to become a wall between us." He leaned back, listening closely. "I have lived many years without being heard," she continued. "I promised myself I would not do that again." He looked at her, seeing both strength and fear in her eyes. "I've been thinking too," he admitted, "more than I ever expected." She waited. "I always believed that some chapters of life close for good," he said slowly. "I thought I had reached that point." "And now?" she asked. "And now I'm not sure," he replied. They sat quietly for a moment, the lantern flickering between them. "I need you to understand something," she said gently. "What I asked before was not about control or expectation. It was about honesty, about knowing whether the future holds anything real." He nodded. "I understand that now." She folded her hands. "I also understand that whatever choice you make, it must be yours." Her respect for his boundaries surprised him. He realized then that she was not asking to be saved. She was asking to be acknowledged. The next day, the rancher went into town again. This time, the whispers were louder. People stared openly, some with curiosity, others with quiet judgment. He heard fragments of conversations as he passed by. Normally, he would have ignored it all. But now, their words felt like pressure pushing in from all sides. On the drive back, anger mixed with doubt. Why should other people decide what was right for his life? Why did kindness become strange when it did not fit common rules? When he reached the ranch, he found her sitting near the small garden she had planted. Tiny green shoots had begun to rise from the soil. "Look," she said, pointing. "Life always finds a way." He crouched beside her, studying the fragile plants. "It does," he agreed. That evening he surprised himself by opening up fully. "I was once told that I waited too long," he said, "that some chances don't come back." She listened carefully. "I believed that," he continued, "so I stopped looking." She placed her hand gently on the table, not touching him but close enough to show support. "Waiting is not the same as giving up," she said. Her words struck something deep inside him. That night he dreamed of his younger self, standing at the edge of this same land, full of plans and doubts. When he woke, his chest felt heavy, but his mind was clearer. Over the following days, small moments brought clarity. He watched how she cared for the animals, how she spoke kindly to strangers, how she treated every task as meaningful. She did not act as though she were running out of time. She acted as though time still mattered. One evening, as the sun dipped low, they walked together along the fence line. The sky glowed softly and the world felt still. "I've made a decision," he said finally. She stopped walking but did not turn to face him right away. "Whatever it is," she said, "thank you for thinking deeply." He took a breath. "I can't promise outcomes," he said honestly, "but I can promise respect, care, and truth." She turned toward him, her eyes calm. "That is all I ever wanted," she said. They stood there, not touching but closer than before. The air between them felt lighter, as if a long-held breath had been released. Later that night, the rancher sat alone again, but this time the silence felt different. It was no longer empty. It was full of intention. Inside her room, the woman sat quietly, her hands resting in her lap. She felt no fear. Whatever came next, she knew she had not hidden from life. Outside, the land stretched wide and open, ready for whatever seeds were planted next, not just in the soil, but in the hearts of two people who had finally chosen to face the future honestly. The change did not happen all at once. It arrived quietly, the way morning light slips into a dark room. After the rancher shared his decision to move forward with honesty and care, both of them felt a shift. It was not excitement or relief. It was responsibility. They understood that choosing truth was only the beginning, not the end. Life on the ranch continued as usual on the surface. Animals still needed care. Fences still needed repair. Meals still needed to be cooked. But inside, both carried new thoughts. The rancher felt more aware of his actions, his words, and the effect they had. The woman felt more grounded, as if her feet were finally planted somewhere solid. It did not take long for the outside world to react. The first sign came when the rancher went into town and noticed people watching him more closely than before. Conversations stopped when he walked past. Some people smiled politely, but their eyes told a different story. Others did not hide their curiosity at all. At the supply store, an old acquaintance spoke openly. "People are talking," the man said, lowering his voice. "I figured," the rancher replied calmly. "They don't understand," the man added. The rancher nodded. "They don't have to." On the drive back, his hands tightened on the steering wheel. He had lived most of his life without caring what others thought. But now it was different. It was no longer only about him. It was about her too. When he returned to the ranch, she noticed the change in his mood immediately. "Something happened," she said gently. "Nothing new," he replied. "Just people being people." She studied his face. "Their words don't define us." "I know," he said, though part of him was still learning how to live that truth. A few days later, the judgment came closer to home. A neighbor stopped by unexpectedly. The visit felt polite on the surface, but the questions were sharp. "So how's married life treating you?" the neighbor asked with a half-smile. The rancher answered simply, "We're doing fine." The neighbor's eyes drifted toward the house. "Different situation you've got there." "Yes," the rancher said firmly. "Different doesn't mean wrong." After the neighbor left, silence filled the space again. The woman had watched from the porch, her posture steady. "You don't need to defend me," she said. "I'm not," he replied. "I'm defending us." Her eyes softened at his words. That night doubt crept in quietly. The rancher lay awake, listening to the sounds of the ranch. He wondered if he was strong enough to stand against judgment, not just once but over time. He had chosen a quiet life to avoid conflict. Now, conflict had found him anyway. In the other room, the woman sat with her thoughts as well. She had expected resistance. What troubled her was the fear that her presence might become a burden to him. She had spent her life avoiding being a problem for others. The idea that she might now be the cause of difficulty hurt deeply. The next morning she spoke. "I need to ask you something," she said as they ate breakfast. "Go ahead," he replied. "If this becomes too much," she said carefully, "if the pressure from others weighs on you, you should tell me." He set down his cup. "Why would you think that?" "Because I know how the world treats people who don't fit," she answered honestly. "I don't want to be the reason you lose your peace." He looked at her steadily. "My peace was empty before," he said. "This is different." Her hands trembled slightly, but she kept her voice calm. "I just want to be sure." "I am," he said. As the days passed, the tension from the community grew. Some people avoided them. Others stared openly when they went into town together. Once, she overheard someone whisper something unkind. She did not react, but the words stayed with her long after. That evening she sat alone on the porch watching the sun go down. The rancher joined her, sensing her distance. "You're quiet," he said. "I'm thinking," she replied. "About what?" "About whether I asked for too much." He turned to her. "You asked for honesty." "That's never too much." She shook her head slowly. "Honesty comes with a cost." "So does silence," he said. The wind moved gently through the land. The ranch felt calm, untouched by the opinions of others. One afternoon, a small incident tested them deeply. While in town, a stranger made a cruel comment loud enough to be heard. The rancher felt anger rise quickly. Before he could respond, the woman placed her hand on his arm. "Don't," she said quietly. He looked at her. "They have no right." "They don't," she agreed. "But we don't need to prove anything to them." He exhaled slowly, letting the moment pass. On the drive home, the silence was heavy. "I should have said something," he finally said. "You did," she replied, "by staying." That night he realized something important. Strength did not always mean speaking loudly or fighting back. Sometimes it meant choosing dignity when insult tried to take it away. Still, doubt returned in quieter moments. The rancher questioned whether his choice would bring more hardship than hope. The woman questioned whether her presence would eventually push him away. One evening, the tension reached a breaking point. "I need to know," she said, her voice shaking for the first time. "Are you sure you can carry this with me?" He looked at her, surprised by the fear in her eyes. "I'm not asking you to carry me," she continued. "I'm asking if you can stand beside me." He stood up and faced her fully. "I have carried loneliness for years," he said. "This is lighter than that." Tears filled her eyes, but she did not let them fall. "I've spent my life being strong alone," she whispered. "I don't know how to be strong with someone else." "We'll learn," he said simply. That moment did not erase the challenges, but it anchored them. They were no longer guessing where they stood. The ranch became their refuge. Away from eyes and judgment, they found comfort in small things. Shared laughter over burned food. Quiet walks under the stars. Conversations that stretched late into the night. Slowly, the voices from outside began to lose their power. They did not disappear, but they faded. One evening, as they sat together watching the land settle into darkness, the woman spoke with calm certainty. "No matter what happens next," she said, "I don't regret choosing to live honestly." The rancher nodded. "Neither do I. The hardest part was not the judgment of others. It was facing their own fears. And now, standing together, they understood that fear did not mean failure. It meant something important was at stake. The land remained wide and open, unchanged by human opinion. And within that space, two people continued forward, not without doubt, but without turning back. The final season arrived quietly, without drama or warning. The land did not announce it, but both of them felt it. Something had settled between them, stronger than doubt, deeper than fear. It was not excitement. It was certainty. Life on the ranch had changed, not in big visible ways, but in meaning. The house no longer felt like a shelter built for one person. It felt lived in. Laughter appeared where silence once ruled. Even the animals seemed calmer, as if they sensed the balance that had formed. The rancher woke one morning and realized something simple but powerful. He was no longer counting time. He was living inside it. They had learned each other's habits. He knew when she needed quiet. She knew when he needed space. They did not fill every silence with words. They let peace do the talking. One afternoon they sat together under the same tree where they had once shared water in silence. The small garden nearby had grown strong. The plants were healthy, their leaves bright and steady. "You were right," he said softly. "Life does find a way." She smiled, her eyes on the soil, only when someone is willing to care for it. That care had become their shared purpose. The outside world had not changed much. Some people still whispered, some still judged, but something else had happened too. A few neighbors began to soften. A greeting here, a question there, not acceptance but curiosity, and curiosity was often the first step toward understanding. One day, an older woman from town stopped by with a basket of bread. She said little, only nodded politely and left. The gesture spoke louder than words. The rancher watched her walk away and felt something lift from his chest. "She didn't say anything," he said. "She didn't need to," the woman replied. As weeks passed, a quiet truth became clear. The future they were building did not need approval, it only needed honesty. One evening the rancher asked a question he had been holding inside. "Do you feel at peace?" he asked. She thought carefully before answering. "Yes," she said. "For the first time in my life I do." He nodded. "Me too." They talked then about legacy, not as fear but as meaning. "I used to think leaving something behind meant one thing only," she said. "Now I see it differently." "So do I," he replied. They had already begun to leave something behind, even if they did not fully see it yet. The way they treated each other, the way they chose kindness over pride, the way they refused to disappear quietly. One morning, the rancher noticed a change in himself while watching the sunrise. He no longer felt like a man waiting for life to end. He felt like someone still contributing to it. He had planted fences, repaired land, and raised animals his whole life. Now he was tending something deeper. The woman, too, felt transformed. She no longer measured her worth by what she could give others. She felt valued simply for being present, for being real. They continued to work side by side. They welcomed a few visitors who came without judgment. They shared meals, stories, and small moments that mattered more than big promises. One evening they sat on the porch as the sky darkened. "Do you ever regret coming here?" he asked gently. She shook her head. "No." "Even the hard days were honest," he smiled. "I think honesty saved us," she looked at him, "and courage." Time passed as it always does, quietly, steadily. The rancher noticed how his heart had softened. He was no longer guarding himself from disappointment. He understood now that risk was not weakness, avoiding life was. The woman noticed how her fears no longer ruled her thoughts. She slept peacefully, woke with purpose, and faced each day without shame. They had not found perfection. They had found something better, understanding. One day as they worked in the garden, she paused and looked at him. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For seeing me," she replied. He felt emotion rise but kept his voice steady. "Thank you for reminding me how." The land around them remained unchanged, wide and patient. It had watched generations come and go. Now it watched two people who had chosen to live fully, no matter their age or history. In the end, the story was never about what others assumed. It was about two human beings refusing to let fear define their final chapters. They did not chase youth. They did not pretend to be something they were not. They stood firmly in who they were and chose meaning over comfort. As seasons continued to turn, the ranch remained a place of quiet strength. And within it lived a truth often forgotten, that life does not end when society says it should. It ends only when we stop choosing to live. And they never did.